Experience a crystal healing and frequency tuning to unlock and regain personal empowerment and control over your own reality.
Can you talk to me about the importance of practicing the spiritual discipline of rest, especially for Black communities? We live in a world where it's dominated by constant stimulation and hustle culture. What does true rest look like in this digital age?
Wow, that's a beautiful, beautiful question. I remember years ago hearing this song, Sleep is the only freedom that she knows. And it was talking about a young girl growing up in a community, um, and the struggles that she had. And I thought to myself, wow, sleep is the only freedom that she knows. It just goes to show that, especially among the Black community, the whole entire Black diaspora on this planet, we are products of a system of slavery and oppression. And so we were enslaved. Our main role was to work. So rest is literally rebellion. And we still feel a lot of guilt around rest. And so the average mother, grandmother, great grandmother figure, we never saw them rest. When we would wake up at 4 or 5 a.m., they would be up, food would be cooked, and the house is ready to go. So there were a group, probably 2 or 3 generations since slavery, that really never truly rested, never understood even the concept of relaxation, never understood how important sleep was, because they were always hyper vigilant, whether it was around protecting themselves from being molested by the slave master, protecting their boy and girl children in the night, protecting their families from being attacked. Can you see how sleep and rest was something that was so distant and remote from their lifestyle? So a whole 2 or 3 generations have grown up being hyperstimulated, hypervigilant, and not being able to relax. Then when the enslavement part fell away, then it became hustle culture. I have to work 4 or 5 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over my head. And that is something that the West Indians are very strong with. They go to the US or they go to the UK and they have to work 3 or 4 jobs to make it all work. So again, we see that this culture of not resting is pervasive right through for both male and female. In the middle of hustle culture now comes technology. So now we have digital technology keeping us up. We're scrolling, we're watching videos, we're watching Netflix, we're doing the most to make sure that we are uh, up to date on what's trending. We've watched the latest episodes of this Netflix series or that Netflix series, and we don't realize that what we are doing is actually detrimental to ourselves. Our body was designed to be switched on during the day and switched off at night so that we can sleep, our organs can repair, our nervous system can relax so that we can be ready to go again tomorrow. But what is happening? We're constantly on. We wake up, our alarm wakes us up, we jump up with a jolt, we don't take any time, we rush into work, we're in a hyper-stimulated environment right away, whether it's in traffic or on the subway, and everybody's angry because everybody's late and somebody's bad driving, somebody road rage. So we're switched on. And then we go to work, and there's the pressure at work of performance and interpersonal relationships that are conflicting. And then we leave work and we come back home. And we have to prepare meals, or we have to go pick up the children. We have to take care of the children's stuff. We don't get any downtime. We don't get any rest time. And the frightening thing is that everybody's on autopilot. So nobody is even realizing that they're go, 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 go. They're on, and they're not even able to switch off because it has grown to be our normal. This is our normal. Being switched on all the time is our normal. And this is the challenge. We are now required to understand that rest is sacred. Rest is critical for the optimal functioning of our bodies. If we don't rest, we don't repair. Yeah? Now they're finding out that this blue light that we're taking in with our devices is messing with brain chemistry if you're on the device after 11. Certain hormones and secretions that are supposed to take place in darkness when the body's at rest are not getting the darkness and are not getting the rest. Okay? So when we start to hear of these rare diseases and rare cancers, these are brought on by our lack of rest, our being tapped into these devices 24/7, our body's inability to just relax and feel safe. If we don't feel safe, we are going to be producing certain chemicals, fight and flight chemicals all day, all night. That's going to lead to cortisol buildup. That's going to lead to all sorts of insulin resistance and all sorts of other things that we wouldn't immediately think of when we think of lack of rest. What happens also is that by the time we get to a certain stage, we can no longer connect with another human because we are on autopilot. We're not even feeling anymore. We don't feel tired anymore because we know we don't have the option of being tired. We have to go to work. We have to get the children to school. We have to get food made. Yeah. And so we are not resting. And then there's the party culture where we go out and we party for an entire weekend, every weekend. In fact, we don't even take a break from partying at a certain age. And that is not sustainable. The body can party, but the body was not really designed for every weekend partying for 6 years. It takes a toll. So it begins to take a toll at the physical level. Then it starts to take a toll at the mental, emotional level. It can also start to take a toll at the familial level, relational level. You know, your capacity to be able to navigate challenges is diminished because you are exhausted. Your capacity to communicate in a calm, neutral way with grace and empathy and compassion, that's gone because you are constantly in fight and flight. You're in defensive mode. You are rushing. You are exhausted. You're operating outside of your body because you just know that you have to be on time and present. But your mind is exhausted. Your soul doesn't even know where to go. So we have a duty to carve out, very selfishly, time for rest. I see it creeping in where people are talking about self care, and that is beautiful. But then I start to see definitions of self care, meaning getting the hair done, getting the nails done while you drink champagne. The body needs rest. The body needs a little bit of solitude. The body needs quiet. Yeah. So sometimes we're sleeping and we have this TV on, giving us all this EMF frequencies, blasting us, so we can't truly sleep. So we don't even know what rest is. A whole generation doesn't know what rest is. Then, in addition to all of what we just discussed, we have a set of young people who have been medicated because of their ADHD, and then they can't sleep and they need another medication to go to sleep, and then they need another medication to wake up. So we really are in a serious state. And the only way to escape from these vicious cycles that have been set up is to consciously carve out the time for rest. Just like how you carve out the time for vacation, carve out the time for girls' night out or girls' weekend, or carve out the time to get your hair done, to put in braids for 8 hours. You can carve out the time for rest with no sound, with no technology on, with no people quarreling near you, just peace. And if you do it and you cultivate it in your children, then you get a family that knows how to rest. And there is hope for humanity if people know how to carve out time, designate time to rest their body, recover their central nervous system, their vagus nerve system, even your digestion. Your liver starts working at 11 p.m. But if you're eating 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, your liver doesn't get to detox in the way it should. And when the liver doesn't switch on time and do its job, then your large intestine and small intestines also are not going to be on time. And this is based on traditional Chinese medicine. All the organs have a time. So when you mess up rest and get thrown off the circadian rhythm, your whole body suffers. That's why people are having indigestion. That's why people are overweight. It doesn't help also that we're eating chemical laden food. So we are throwing off our hormones, our endocrine system, all of those things. We have a duty and responsibility to carve out the time to sleep and to relax the body and relax the mind. And don't fall into the trap of relaxing your mind by watching a movie, because again, that's another trap where when you're watching the movie you have to follow the plot. What are you taking into the movie? Is it a lot of murder? Is it a lot of, you know, violence and sex and you know, deception and all of those things? What are you feeding your mind while you're in rest? So these are things to consider.
Paula, can you talk to me about the connection between star seeds and African mass, and what ancestral or cosmic symbolism is embedded in those traditional designs?
Okay, first of all, star seeds is a very modern, new agey designation, mostly associated with UFOs and Andromeda and Pleiades and the Galactic Council, which very much had to do with modern pop culture, Star Wars. But if one should look a little deeper, Starseed framework really is coming from the whole African spiritual system. So they take all of what they're all about from that. So it's definitely not the other way around. Now, because of pop culture, we tend to think of galactic visitors or beings in a certain frame, you know, the greys and the reptilians and so on. But if you think about it very deeply, the African masks are the true depictions of what the African cosmology have been experiencing. Because guess what? Masks are technically the bridge or the portal between the earth and the cosmos. Yeah? When they're medicine men, they're, you know, in West Africa, the Dibias, in South Africa, the different shamans, when they take whatever medicine or they go through whatever ritual, they're bridging the cosmos or the other dimensions and earth. They're tapping in and accessing the heavenly realm and those beings. And so when they paint these masks, they're usually mapping the cosmos, mapping the heavens, or basically encoding messages into the masks. For example, if we're to look at some of the symbolism painted on the mask, they have zigzags, and those zigzags would represent like the lightning. And then they have spirals, which would represent like the galaxies, and they might have dots, which would represent the stars. Now remember, the African spiritual systems and cosmologies are oral traditions. They didn't document stuff. So they drew stuff, they danced, they chanted, they raised their vibration to go into certain states, you know, states where they could, altered states where they would be able to connect with the heavenly beings or the star beings. So, for example, the Dogons, they had it years ago when the first colonizers went among the Dogons. They were able to demonstrate very clearly through their drawings and their masks that they were in fact in communication with beings from Sirius A and Sirius B. And so their Kanaga mask is symbolic of that connection. It's a map as well as encoded information about those star systems. So when we see a mask, we shouldn't just look at it and say, oh, that's ugly or oh, that's pretty. It's so much more than just what it looks like. Remember, they wear masks when they are going to go into ceremony, into ritual. And basically, when they put on the masks, they are embodying they become the bridge between the two worlds, the heavenly and the earthly. And it is during these ceremonies when they have on these masks and there's dancing and there's drumming and there's chanting and there's perhaps consumption of certain herbs and plant medicines, that they are able to access those higher realms, those cosmic realms, to get information to guide their tribe. So it's a very interesting scenario where they seemed for many, many more years to have been able to have a very harmonious connection and communication with the beings from the star systems. If we should break it down, for example, and look at, let us say, some of the Orishas in Yoruba, you will see that some of the characters, the characteristics and traits of certain of the deities are very specifically aligned to certain star systems. When we think of Obatala, the Sky Father, and Yamaya, the river mother. You can see the spiritual authority embodied in those deities. So not just the masks, but the deities also bring in, incorporate this whole connection with the star systems. Among the Dogons, they reference the Nomos. The Nomos are the beings that brought information from the heavens to them and gave them a lot of spiritual information that they use to guide their lives and their existence in their communities and their tribes. Very interesting. When they're having ceremony, the wearers of the masks, remember the masks are encoded with not just patterns and designs, but colors and symbolism. For example, the birds. Anytime you see that bird symbolism, it is talking about the messenger between heaven and earth. When you see the antelope symbolism, that is indicative of speed and agility, which is very, this is all widespread among a lot of the tribes. Remember, when we're talking about African spirituality, we're talking about 54 different countries and a gazillion different tribes and groups, and each have their own cosmology. Very similar, but all different. But there are some symbols, you know, the birds, the serpents, and the antelopes are all very common. The serpent being, again, the cosmic life force moving up, you know, almost like Kundalini energy. These are not the words they use, but just remember they're the foundation. Everything comes off of the African cosmology. Technically, the masks are tools of cosmic remembrance. They don't sit down and write any document that says this is what happens. But technically, when they go into ceremony, without saying anything, the encoding, the symbolism, the colors that they use on the masks are part of the cosmic remembrance. When they add the drums, they add the dancing and the chanting, the wearers of the masks become the living conduits of the information flow between heaven and earth. And this is a beautiful thing. It's almost like the star seeds now. The star seeds are the ones that are feeling like they're the ones that are anchoring the light from the cosmos at this time. So it's basically the same thing, except there is something more ancient and powerful and real about the relationship that the African spirituality had with the actual galactics. It's very interesting because lately, you know, I normally interact with a lot of people who come to me for counseling and so on. You know, we talk through stuff. And very recently, it switched from people reaching out to me about, you know, interpersonal relationships and challenges to persons coming to me describing encounters that they had in the dream realm with groups of beings seemingly off planet, seemingly in a different star system. And it became very regular enough for me to pick up a pattern in a very specific period last year between October and December. So there was two groups. One group that seemed to be taken out into the heavens, to the different planets and star systems, and another group that were being taken under the sea. So again, we are learning more and more that a lot of the non-human beings that are being encountered and that are in fact a part of our DNA are both from out in the heavens and others are seemingly from under the sea. And this is now become mainstream, where they're saying that a lot of the UFOs are coming from the oceans. And if you think about African spirituality, there is a very, very close connection between the people and the rivers and the people and the oceans and the seas. So it's very, very interesting. And I think as time goes by, we're going to start to see more correlations between things, the New Agey stuff, and the foundations of all of the New Agey stuff, which is on the continent of Africa.
What is the Schumann Resonance, and why do you think it has become such a hot topic in the spiritual and wellness circles today?
Okay. So the Schumann's resonance is basically the heartbeat or the pulse of Mother Earth. And so it's an indicator of how strongly her heart is beating. If someone is in distress, their heartbeat speeds up or it intensifies. And when they're at peace, then there's like a resting heart rate, yeah? So they now have a mechanism for measuring the Schumann's resonance, which is the Earth's heartbeat, the Earth's electromagnetic frequency, essentially. And so as a result, people are able to track the Earth's electromagnetism all the time. Now, how is it generated? Basically, there's a relationship between Mother Earth and the sun. And so the amount of stellar radiation or solar radiation hitting the planet is encapsulated in the space between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. The ionosphere is about 60 to 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. So it's that area around the Earth that gets activated by the solar radiation. And then it interacts with the Earth and the space and gets a vibration. Almost like if you had a drum and you spoke into it and there was like an echo between the walls of the drum and the empty space. So that's what the Schumann's resonance is. No, I think the reason why there's a bit of a buzz around it is because the natural resting pulse or resonance of the Earth is about 7.83 hertz. Yeah? But guess what? The waves generated by the brain is about 7.83 hertz. And so is the heart. So what is very clear is that there is a correlation between the Earth's heartbeat and our brain waves and our heartbeat. So if you should look at the humans being connected to Mother Earth, then you would understand why people are now beginning to track the correlation between the Schumann's resonance and the humans. So we are in a period they call the awakening period, and it is said that during awakening, our vibration is raising, our frequency is getting higher. Likewise, what we're realizing is that more often than not, the Schumann's resonance is going above the 7.8 hertz. It's going up to as much as 32, 54 hertz, which is unheard of. In fact, recently it has been going off the charts. In other words, the frequency is so high that the devices that usually read the Schumann's resonance are no longer able to collect data. So what it really is showing is that we are going through something. Earth is actually going through an ascension process because its frequency is increasing. Yeah? Likewise, all of us that are on the earth are going through the same process, and our frequency is also increasing. So it's a very interesting study. I think there is a station in Tomsk, Russia, And so a lot of apps are carrying the data from the station in Russia. And so people are able to see when there is a Schumann's resonance spike above the normal 7.8 hertz. And they're beginning to realize that there are some very sensitive people, people with spiritual gifts, that are actually able to feel when the Schumann's resonance spikes. So some people describe feeling nausea. Some people describe not being able to sleep. Some people have a low pressure headache. Some people feel dizzy. And so when they check the Schumann's resonance, it's off the charts and they're like, oh, so now a lot of people are beginning to correlate these sensations that they're able to pick up with spikes in the Schumann's resonance. And of course, usually these spikes are associated with solar flares. The solar flares, of course, excite the space between the Earth and the ionosphere, charge, extra charges, and so you have lots of lightning storms. And so people anticipate it, as well as sometimes they have what we call space weather, which is again when you have a lot of photonic charge in the atmosphere. Sometimes it's not associated with the solar flares. And that's when people are puzzled. They're like, why is the Schumann's resonance spiking? No, here's where it gets to pseudoscience and some people don't believe. It is believed that there is a correlation between the Earth's pulse and the population. And if there's something dreadful happening, for example, a global catastrophe, and everybody's feeling really sad, their hearts are open, then they'll see a surge or a spike in the Schumann's resonance. Or if there's a great joy on the planet, then there's also some spikes in the Schumann's resonance, and vice versa. So what they're saying is that humanity as a collective can influence the Schumann's resonance, and the Schumann's resonance can influence the human collective. So it's a very interesting space. We're still learning a lot about it. But for the time being, for those persons who just want to know what the basics is, it's basically the pulse of Mother Earth and how she is feeling at this time. And it's influenced by solar weather, space weather, the weather outside of the planet.
How does the feeling of failure, particularly among divorced women or single mothers, influence behaviors or thought patterns that may be keeping them single? And how can that inner narrative be written or healed?
I feel sad sometimes when I watch social media and I see angry Black women, bitter Black women, ratchet Black women. And all of it is related to the stress that that group of people, and you notice I haven't even gotten into the Black men, it's the Black women. We are supposed to be demure, soft, feminine, filled with joy, nurturing, kind. This is what our ancestors, our forefathers on the continent, all indigenous groups embodied those attributes. Yeah. But there was so much different back then when community and family were the foundations of your very existence. So the men knew what they had to do, they were the providers, and the women knew what they had to do: nurture, feed, and take care of the family. We still have the institution of marriage. but we do not have the support of community and family in the way that we did 200, 300 years ago, 100 years ago even. So we are conditioned through religion to honor sanctity of marriage. But there's always been a philosophical separation between church and state, where the church is saying one thing and the state, the system is saying another. What the church is saying and what the system demands will not allow what the church says to persist with respect to marriage. So now we are seeing it was common for people to get married once they were 19, 20, and they started having children by 21, 22. And by the time they're 30, their children are teenagers and the family is knitted and there is structure and continuity. Now we see women having to leave relationships and marriages sometimes because they're simply not sustainable, because the men aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And then they push this whole thing about independent Black women and professional Black women, and everybody's all about, oh, I can do that all by myself. I can provide, since I'm providing and you're not providing, I can do this by myself. And so what we're having now is the imbalance, the not having the masculine and the feminine principle coming together to make this house a home, make this home a family. That is frustrating for someone who's grown up with the church telling them that marriage is the penultimate goal of being a woman and having children. So when women divorce, there is a disappointment, almost shame, and a sense of failure that they were not able to achieve what the church and society expected. I see a little shift recently where people are actually celebrating divorce right now and saying, girl, good on you to get out of that. And I understand to some extent why that is, because some of the reasons why people leave marriages is because of domestic violence, which for many years, centuries perhaps, women were quite okay staying in a marriage that had violence in it because that's what she thought she had to do. Things have changed now with communication and social media and advocacy and so on. Women are standing up for themselves and walking away if it's too violent. But coming back to this whole issue of feeling like they have failed because of divorce, it's for only one reason: what we've been conditioned by religion to believe, that divorce is bad, divorce is wrong. We're right now at this juncture in a situation where these cycles of silence and suffering, these women are actually not failing, they're succeeding because they're breaking those cycles of suffering in silence in a marriage. And so I think it's important for us to be careful with how we rewrite the narrative so that it's not a failure. It's self-preservation and self-care, because you are worthy of having a beautiful life without anybody being violent towards you or abusing you. Yeah? So I think it's really our duty as persons who are aware of what is happening all over the world in different cultures, in different spaces. It's our duty as women to come together and rewrite the narrative that we want to start um, living and experiencing right now, where we no longer look at divorce as a failure, but rather embodying your self-worth. And so this is the way the narrative needs to be shifted at this time. So we have a beautiful opportunity right now to do that, especially among Black women, um, with respect to the corporate profile and how we need to recalibrate our identities. Again, it goes back to the material and the hustle culture and feeling that success is defined by how high I climb on the ladder, corporate ladder, how much money I'm earning, what kind of house I live in, what kind of handbag I carry, what kind of car I drive. If we can start to rewrite the narrative so that the parameters for success sound more like happiness, true happiness, peace, tranquility, grace, integrity, dignity.
Many people talk about, wanting happiness, but you don't realize that happiness is actually a practice, something that you have to be practicing. What daily practice can people, implement to raise those same frequencies and cultivate a more consistent experience of happiness?
So first of all, let's define happiness as being at complete peace within, in spite of what might be going on the outside. Now that is it seems like a very distant goal, because modern society is so dedicated to taking us outside of ourselves that very rarely do we even know what it is to be at complete peace with ourselves and to hold peace within. This is one of the greatest challenges of living in modern society. It is designed with distractions as the primary thing. There is, the devices, video games, there is your job, there is the, marriages, relationships, there is, the hustle culture that all of us are now drawn into. And all of these things are systematically taking us away from ourselves. So we are drawn outside. We're drawn into everything else. Gossip, social climbing, climbing the corporate ladder, finding true love, fitting in with the group, the social group or the communities that we find ourselves part of. It starts from very early, from we're in kindergarten, where, our mothers organize play dates for us, and then we feel like we have to fit in with everybody else. So by the time we get to high school, we have never even cultivated happiness. We don't know what it is. It's always just been, oh, what do they think of me? Or does he like me? Or will I get the job? Or did I get a good grade? So we have now associated happiness with externalities, with materials, with emotional responses, with friendships, with relationships, with how we look, with our educational attainment, with our professional attainment, with our popularity. So now most people are totally disconnected from the whole concept of happiness. But happiness is an inside job. And so what is required is for us to truly know how it feels to be happy. And many of us really haven't asked ourselves the question. So how do we cultivate happiness in this world, you know. It goes back to what our ancestors used to do, what our forefathers used to do, what was important. And I fear a lot of that is being lost because of how modern society is, where everything is scheduled, every hour is scheduled. We don't have this soft easing into the day with morning rituals. I remember growing up, my grandmother had a very extended morning ritual where she eased into the day. She would wake up, she would drink her tea, and she would go into deep prayer, and she would listen to some music, and she would cry, and then she would pray, and she would do many things. But that was part of her connecting in the silence of the morning with God, with divine source, with creator, and then showing gratitude for life, for food, for a roof over the head, for healthy children and grandchildren, those kinds of things. So I think a very important part of cultivating happiness, starts with ensuring that you have a regular morning ritual, whether we're not alarm clock culture is probably what's keeping us away from our happiness, because we basically get this thing to bring, and we wake up, we jump into the bathroom, shower, whatever, and just get into the day. And we don't ease gently into the day, showing gratitude, being grateful for life, acknowledging our ancestors, God, Creator, and so on. So I think a morning ritual is very important. I think also in cultivating happiness, we need to do the things that we like to do. And especially for people in diaspora, whether it's the Caribbean diaspora, African diaspora, other indigenous groups, one thing that we all know that we all do is sing and dance and drum and those things that bring us joy. You see how much joy is generated when people are singing and dancing? So that's also something that we should all commit to doing, carving out time to dancing and singing and just being joyful. Yeah? So basically, like, cultivate your joy like you would water a plant. Like, carve out time for that. And when I say that, I don't mean some of the vile music that is coming out right now. That is not good for your central nervous system. Stay away from that kind of music. Bring in the music that makes your soul happy. Even if it's Sunday school music or songs, because that was a time when you were young and you knew true joy and true happiness. So even that is going to be beneficial for you. So the morning ritual, singing and dancing, very important. Another thing that's very important in terms of cultivating happiness is creative expression. All of us have some kind of creativity. If you don't feed it and allow it to flourish, then there's a part of you that you don't even know is becoming suppressed and unhappy and is literally dying. And so we need to water our creative expression. Does that mean you like to write poetry, or you like to write music, or you like to draw, or you like to take photos, or you like to go swim, or you like to go take a hike? Do the things that bring you joy, because joy is like the precursor to like true happiness. Yeah. So doing the things that you really like to do. And then the last thing I think that brings happiness is camaraderie, community. We as humans are communal. We're not meant to exist in isolation. As it stands currently, because of how we've been cultured, a lot of us are in isolation. We're not making meaningful connections anymore. we're basically just in autopilot. We show up for work, we get the job done, we communicate only on an as needed basis. Some of us are even hostile because we are existing in a state of distrust. So we don't trust anybody anymore because they're scammers and they're kidnappers and there's backstabbing at work and so everything is so tense now. But ultimately, one should try to make meaningful connections with the people around them because that nourishes the soul and that also creates some level of happiness. So community or communal connections with other persons is also a part of cultivating happiness. I mean, there's some people who they don't really like to be around people. And so they treasure their own company. And if that's what brings you happiness, then by all means do that. And the final thing I think in terms of happiness is to be able to understand how to preserve your peace. So it means establishing boundaries. So if you know that those persons over there are very negative, they gossip, always talking about other people, always quarreling, always fighting, you want to preserve your peace, just distance yourself from them. Because what's going to happen is if you hang around people like that, they're going to steal your joy and ultimately your happiness. You're going to be embroiled in their chaos and their drama and their unhappiness and their anger and their frustration and their bitterness, all of those emotions that take away your true happiness. So really and truly making an effort to establish solid boundaries, to preserve your peace, to ensure that you are surrounded by positivity, positive narratives all the time, as best as possible. This means what you feed yourself in terms of what you hear, what you play, what you read, what you consume, how your timeline looks. Is your timeline scandalous and seeing what's going on here and there and looking at the latest trending things? We have to make the distinction between distractions, entertainment, and happiness, right? Because we are being, our happiness is being swapped out for entertainment. We have all these challenges and these trending things that are going on. Yes, it brings us joy, but it also takes us away from ourselves and our ability to truly feel happiness. If I were to talk about the things that make somebody unhappy, for example, I would be talking about, oh, you don't have money, or you don't have a job, or you don't have a significant other, or you're 40 odd and you're not married, or you don't have any children. Those are externalities. Happiness, true happiness, doesn't depend on what's going on the outside. It's an inside job. So it's your ability to remain neutral and at peace and have grace in the midst of the external chaos. That's what true happiness is, and that's what should be our goal.